Hey everybody, this is Ryan McClanahan with historythroughcards.com. Hope you're all doing very well on this first day of 2025. Happy New Year's, everybody. So, in this video, I'm going to read to you the Orlando Cepeda vs. Cowles magazine and broadcasting case from April 3rd, 1964. And as far as I know, this is the first case of its kind, which makes it pretty important. And when you look at, say, Orlando Cepeda's rookie card from 1958, it's a very popular card. But the first thing I had thought of was this particular case. And Orlando Cepeda's his career, he actually did get in the Hall of Fame many years later, in fact. I think they kind of waited a little bit too long. In any case, he is in the Hall of Fame, and this is one of the first cases that I'm aware of, and you'll see exactly why. So, without any further ado, here we go. This is Cepeda vs. Cowles Magazine and Broadcasting, United States Court of Appeals, Ninth Circuit, April 3rd, 1964. The case is actually from February 27th, 1964. A rehearing denied April 3rd, 1964. Lewis Stein and Marvin Lewis, San Francisco, California, for appellant. Cooper White Cooper, Sheldon G. Cooper, Charles W. Kennedy, J. Raymond Healy, and Eugene J. McDonald, San Francisco, California, for appellee. Before Chambers and Jetterberg, circuit judges, and Madden, judge of the Court of Claims. Madden, judge. The suit for libel was brought by Orlando Cepeda against Cowles Magazine and Broadcasting Inc. because of an article about Cepeda published in the defendant's weekly magazine, Look, in its May 21st, 1963 issue. The author of the article is described by the appellee, hereinafter called the defendant, as a nationally recognized sports writer and baseball authority. The suit was filed by the plaintiff in the Superior Court of the State of California in San Francisco and was removed at the insistence of the defendant on the grounds of diversity of citizenship to the United States District Court for the Northern District of California, Southern Division. That court granted the defendant's motion for a summary judgment, apparently on the grounds that the language used in the defendant's article was not libelous per se, since the court stated that the plaintiff had stipulated that he would not amend his complaint to allege special damages. Cepeda had been, during the 1962 season, a member of the San Francisco Giants baseball team, which had won the National League pennant in that year and had lost the World Series to the New York Yankees in a 7-game series. He was one of the ablest and best-known players on the San Francisco team. He was a member of the San Francisco team again in 1963, at the time early in the 1963 baseball season when the article here involved was published by the defendant. The article said that Cepeda's name had a sale tag on it, that it is astonishing that Cepeda, power hitter and slick fielder on a pennant winner, should be considered expendable, that he had for some time been in disfavor with owner Horace Stoneham, manager Alvin Dark, and the club's cue takers, unquote. That among the counts against him were 2. He is not a team man. 3. When things go wrong, he blames everybody but Orlando. 4. He does not rebound and take it out on the opposition, unquote. That he has a doghouse status with the Giants hierarchy, which deem him temperamental, uncooperative, and underproductive, unquote, that one Giant executive had said in regard to the Giants' first visit to their former New York playing field to play the New York Mets and the thunderous reception they had given Cepeda's teammate Willie Mays. Quote, Orlando didn't get over that for quite a while. It helped pave the way for what happened to him in the second half of the season, unquote. The fact was that Cepeda's play in the second half of that season was below his standard of the first half. In connection with the article was a photograph of Cepeda being banned by the umpire from the game because he had made a violent gesture of dissatisfaction at being called out at the first base. Section 45 of the Civil Code of California defines libel as a false and underprivileged publication by writing, printing, picture, effigy, or other fixed representation to the eye, which exposes any person to hatred, contempt, ridicule, or obloquy, or which causes him to be shunned or avoided, or which has a tendency to injure him in his occupation. To write of a well-known baseball player who, in the course of a season, would be under the interested observation of hundreds of fellow players and hundreds of thousands of paying customers and of the management establishments of all the teams in the two big leagues, that this player, in spite of great ability as a player, as a, quote, doghouse status, unquote, with the management hierarchy of his own pennant-winning team, which regards him as not a team man who blames everyone but himself when things go wrong, but is temperamental, uncooperative, and underproductive, is a member of the team who has been characterized by at least one executive of his team as being so consumed with jealousy of one of his teammates that his ability as a player was adversely affected for one half of a baseball season would, for those who read and believed the writing, tend to produce the effects that find in the civil code. These statements would produce feelings of contempt and ridicule for one who, because of these faults of temperament, failed to fulfill the promise of his great natural physical abilities. They would tend to injure Cepeda in his occupation of a notable baseball player because they would put the management of the other 19 teams in the big leagues on notice that if they acquired Cepeda, they would get not only the asset of a great ability as a player, but also the troublesome and disrupting liability of his temperament. Naturally, they would discount his value accordingly. The Civil Code of California says in part, a libel which is defamatory of the plaintiff without the necessity of explanatory matter such as an inducement, innuendo, or other extrinsic fact is said to be a libel on its face, unquote. The defendant urges that the district court was right in holding that the defendant's article was not libelous on its face. In the case of McLeod v. Tribune Publishing Company, Inc., the Supreme Court of California recounted the judicial and legislative history leading to the enactment applying 54A to our instant case and paraphrasing the language of the Supreme Court of California in the case of Maidman v. Jewish Publications, Inc., we would say the article in question would not have any effect other than to cause injury to the reputation of a person in Cepeda's position. It was, if false, a underprivileged libelous on its face, i.e. per se, and there was no necessity for any allegation or proof of special damages resulting from it. The defendant also urges that its article was privileged. A significant feature of the defendant's writing was that although the author is said by the defendant to be a nationally recognized sports writer and baseball authority, the parts of the article in question of which the plaintiff complains contain practically nothing of this authority's opinion or criticism. What it gives the reader is a report of what the writer says Cepeda's employers, the management of the San Francisco Giants, were thinking and saying about him. Some of the thoughts were expressly attributed to that source, and the rest of them would be attributed by a reader to that source, since the writer of the article could not have known them except by learning them directly or indirectly from that source. We do not then have a situation in which the interested but relatively unsophisticated baseball buffs among Look magazine's millions of readers were being enlightened by a nationally recognized authority's analysis and opinion of l'affaire Cepeda. If the article was a true report, the reader still got only what an eavesdropper with an acute ear and an accurate memory might have learned by listening at the keyhole of the Giants' front office. There are obvious difficulties about fitting this kind of writing into a philosophy upon the privilege of fair comment is based. The plaintiff says that the Giants officials did not entertain the favorable opinions which the defendant's writer attributed to them, since one may not escape liability or defamation by showing that he was merely repeating defamatory language used by another person. A forgery he may not escape by falsely attributing to others the idea to which he gives expression. The attribution to others may well make the defamation more serious. If, for example, a sports writer quoted Joe DiMaggio as having said that Cepeda in the batter's box was a helpless clown, that attributed opinion would carry more weight and be more damaging than a similar opinion of the sports writer himself. Attribution of the opinion that Cepeda's temperament was unsuited to championship baseball to the Giants' management, the ones in a position to know most about his temperament, would similarly add to the weight of the opinion. The defendant relies heavily upon the California Code provision relating to qualified privilege. Section 47(3) of the Civil Code says, "A privileged publication or broadcast is one made in the communication without malice to a person interested therein, 1. By one who is also interested, or 2. By one who stands in such relation to the person interested as to afford a reasonable ground for supposing the motive for the communication innocent, or the qualified privilege invoked by the defendant in the privilege of the fair comment and criticism." This is a generally recognized privilege. There is, however, a diversity of opinion in the various state courts as to whether the privilege covers not only fair comment or criticism concerning proved or admitted facts, but also misstatements of facts to which the comment or criticism is related. Professor Prosser, in his text on torts, says that 3/4 of the states hold the qualified privilege on account of public interest does not extend to any assertion of fact, but he cites the case of Snively v. Record Publishing Company as taking the contrary view. The Snively case involved a publication in a local newspaper or a cartoon with writings inserted which imputed criminal dishonesty to the local chief of police. The court stressed the interest of the newspaper and its readers in the conduct of local officials and the necessity of free speaking and publishing on those matters without fear of actions for defamation. In the case of Mara vs. Devlin, the alleged libel was a charge of mismanagement of public funds. The court held, as Snively had held, that the qualified privilege granted by subdivision 3 of 47 of the Civil Code extended to non-malice, untrue statements of fact as well as to criticism and opinion. In the case of Freeman v. Mills, the District Court of Appeal of California, 2nd District, held that a publication in letters between members of a race course investigation bureau relating to the conduct of the plaintiff as a race course starter was a communication between interested persons and was qualifiedly privileged. Even though false, in the absence of malice, the court cited Snively in Larrick v. Gilhoun, a case involving statements about public officers. The court recognized that Snively doctrine, though it did not cite Snively. In McLeod v. Tribune Publishing Company, a case of a newspaper attack upon a candidate for public office, the Supreme Court of California held that Civil Code 47.3 and Snively doctrine did not extend a qualified privilege to a statement published with knowledge of its falsity or without an honest belief in its truth. The court cited Prosser torts and reinstatement torts. In the case of Morris v. National Federation of the Blind, the California District Court of Appeal, 1st District, held Section 47.3 of the Civil Code of California did not give a qualified privilege to the publication in a national magazine of general circulation or characterization of the plaintiff as a racketeer who made misrepresentations to the public concerning his sale of products manufactured by blind and handicapped persons. The court said that the publication was not to a limited group whose interest warranted the disclosure to them. If we regarded the defendant's article as presenting a genuine problem of qualified privilege, we would be uncertain as to whether the California doctrine of regarding misstatement as facts in writing or speaking about candidates for office or office holders or between persons in the relation of mutually interested parties as Freeman v. Mills, the racetrack starter case as privileged, would be applied by its courts to actors and artists and distinguished athletes, or would extend to so widely distributed a publication as that of the defendant's magazine. A prominent member of the distinguished team, like Cepeda of the San Francisco Giants, has a wide, almost national audience for his performances, and that wide audience would have an interest in the comments and criticisms of a nationally recognized sports writer and baseball authority about Cepeda's performance. The public interest might be served by allowing to such a writer not only great freedom in comment and criticism, but some leeway in his factual statements. However, as we have indicated earlier in this opinion, the defendant's writer did not purport to give his readers the benefit of his analysis and comment on either Cepeda's baseball performance or his baseball temperament. He was merely passing on to his readers what he purported to have learned from other persons. We do not see how a public policy in favor of fair comment is relevant or could generate a privilege in this unusual type of situation. The district court was in error in rendering summary judgment for the defendant, and its judgment is reversed. Chambers Circuit Judge concurring and dissenting. In my view, the summary judgment should be reversed and the case should go to the jury only on a following single sentence. Quote, when things go wrong, he, Orlando Cepeda, blames everybody but Orlando, unquote. This is a statement of fact which accuses Cepeda of being a troublemaker. It is not a comment on his art. On this point, I believe the publisher should be put to his proof that naturally the whole article should come into evidence to show the context in which it was written. Other than the above indicated, I dissent. To make my point, I feel I must set forth in an appendix the entire article, less pictures, of course, with the portions of which he complains italicized. It seems to me that on the whole, the article is a lot of fife, fifle, fiffle, fifle, I don't know. Counsel for appellee characterizes it as a think piece. I have trouble finding much thought in it. I have lived long enough to believe that the principal problem with the article created was not one for Cepeda, but was one for owner Horace Stoneham and manager Dark. After the publication, they must have had a great many players on their team who were quite envious of Orlando Cepeda because of the publicity which Cepeda had obtained in Look magazine. I do not believe that the libel law of California obligates us to police the general run for sports writers' fantasy and horse feathers, of which the subject article is a part. I do not think the trial court is obligated to probe what Horace Stoneham and Alvin Dark are thinking, or to find out whether Cepeda is or is not in the doghouse. I do think perhaps we do have a possible Little League libel here in the single statement which I have quoted above. Normally, we should not comment on damage at this juncture, but I do think that possibly the thing that may have led the trial judge to overlook the simple statement of when things go wrong, he blames everybody but Orlando is the wholly out of reason prayer for damages in the amount of $1 million. In my view, there is a good argument that no possible damage of $10,000 or judicial minimum in diversity could be sustained, and that the case therefore should be sent back to the state courts. Orlando Cepeda Can He Slug His Way Out of the Doghouse by Tim Cohane, sports editor of Look. Orlando Cepeda. The name seems to need a Don in front of it or a cigar band around it. Instead, it wears the sale tag, First Class First Baseman San Francisco Giants, tradable for top-notch pitcher and other considerations. Until the trading deadline, midnight, June 15th, a National League team may decide it can better itself by giving the Giants all they wanted for Cepeda. The possibility is scant, nevertheless. It is astonishing that Cepeda, power hitter and slick fielder on a pennant winner, should be considered expendable, and expendable he has been since the end of last season. The big fellow, whom they call Chico and the Baby Bull, has for some time been in disfavor with owner Horace Stoneham, manager Alvin Dark, and the club's cue-takers. The counts against him: 1. He doesn't produce the crucial hit often enough. 2. He is not a team man. 3. When things go wrong, he blames everybody but Orlando. 4. He does not rebound and take it out on the opposition. 5. He is a hardly holdout every year. A hot and loud bat can drown out the stains of discord, and Cepeda may slug his way back to the grace, or the active bat might impress Stoneham principally as a boost to Orlando's market value. For Cepeda's doghouse status traces less to unfavorable interpretation of his batting statistics than it does his overall performance, with Stoneham and the rest of the Giants hierarchy deemed temperamental, uncooperative, and underprotective. Unlike most owners, Horace Stoneham is a substantially knowledgeable baseball man. His has been the decisive voice in giant trades that have yielded high returns. His record in dealing with managers, players, and other employees bespeaks a patience and loyalty uncommon among magnates. But when one or a combination of reasons finally turns him against a man, Stoneham can be as unshakable as old Coogan's bluff. Evidence of front office disenchantment with Cepeda has been piling up ever since the Giants' near miss in last October's 7-game World Series with the New York Yankees. From November 21st through December 15th, when interleague trades without interleague waivers were permissible, the Giants talked with American League teams about Orlando. "We would dearly have loved to have him," says one executive in the American League. "Trouble is, to get him we would have had to give them the most of our ball club." Cepeda, reports another, was available to any American League club willing and able to give up the big league pitcher and a few other things. Say minor league player valued at $100,000. Nobody felt they could afford to give up the pitcher without weakening themselves. Unquote. After the interleague deadline, the Giants turned to National League clubs, but the same roadblocks barred action, so the prospects of making a suitable deal for Cepeda are not good. In baseball, however, situations change rapidly. The fall-off of a star or a sudden rise of a youngster can almost overnight transform a team's trading approach. Although trade talks involving Cepeda were unpublicized, his soured situation with the Giants was emphasized when they sent him his contract. In 1962, his salary was estimated at $46,500, a $16,500 increase over 1961, when he knocked in 142 runs, hit 46 home runs, and averaged .311. The Giants went on to win the 1962 pennant and make a strong World Series showing. Under such conditions, raises for all were customary, but the club asked Cepeda to take a cut, reportedly deep, then offered him the same salary as in 1962. Orlando balked. Finally, unable to make a deal, the Giants took themselves off a somewhat awkward hook by granting Cepeda a token raise of $1,000. Orlando, having won a point of pride, predicted that if he had as good a season in 1963 as in 1961, Stoneham would have to do handsomely by him. Manager Alvin Dark rates his players by a plus and minus system. Our players get a plus every time they do a little extra to help win a game. Anytime a player misses a sign or fails to drive in a runner from third with less than 2 out in a key spot, he's charged with a minus. Single pluses are given for good effort, homers, sacrifices, squeeze plays, key hits, good fielding plays in the early going. Extra pluses are awarded for late inning performance that helps tie or win a game. Shortly before Cepeda signed, Dark revealed that by this system, Willie Mays, the brilliant center fielder, and third baseman Jimmy Davenport, rated 1-2 in 1961 and 1962. Despite a 1962 record of 35 home runs, 114 runs batted in, and a .306 average, Cepeda was, in Dark's words, terribly minus. Pressed on this, Dark said, "I'm answering because you asked, but Cepeda had 40 more minuses than pluses. a terrible record, he added, especially for the last half of the season. I don't know what Dark is talking about in the plus and minus business, said Cepeda. What about the first half of the season? My record speaks for itself. Orlando's opinion is not the organization's. The Giants had to make a tearing stretch to run to tie the Dodgers in the regular season. They had to do it again to win the playoff, 2 out of the 3. The Giants feel that if Cepeda hadn't failed to make the big hit so often, their job would have been far easier. They also feel that the failure of Orlando's bat to bang, except in the 6th game, cost them the World Series. Dark, as a shortstop on championship Boston Braves and New York Giants teams in the 40s and 50s, was a completely selfless, dedicated competitor, and he expects dedication. By a fine here and a statement direct or oblique there, he intimated both the 1961 and 1962 seasons that Cepeda did not help the team as much as he should have. After Dark's predecessor, Bill Rigney, took over the Los Angeles Angels in 1961, he stated that he never had been able to make a team player out of the baby bull. The atmosphere that has consequently developed suggests that if Orlando ever does fulfill his potential, it will be for another team. The Giants may well believe this, which explains their effort to deal him into the American League. Indispensable to an understanding of the Cepeda controversy is Willie Mays. When the Giants moved from New York to San Francisco in 1958, Mays was a long-established superstar, Cepeda a rookie of resplendent possibilities, but untried. Mays had made his reputation, however, in New York, where some writers were so bold as to compare him to an all-around center fielder with Joe DiMaggio, a San Francisco product. So fans extended Mays a cool hand, looked around for a number one hero uncontaminated by the polo grounds, and installed the heralded Cepeda. Cepeda strengthened his position with a fast start. Mays, meanwhile, felt strange in the new city, sensed his tepid reception, and was harried by personal problems. Even when he hit .347 that first year in Seals Stadium, Candlestick Park was not ready until 1960. Willie was not himself. In 1961, strangeness and personal problems behind him, he began to play like the old Mays. His magnificent contributions, especially in the crisis to the 1962 pennant, San Francisco's first in the big leagues, finally won him full warm acceptance. Meanwhile, Cepeda's 5-year performance was far from a flop. Totals covering 1958 through 1962 reveal him a definite but respectable second to Willie in all batting departments. Hits 943, 922, doubles 173, 163, triples 36, 16 home runs 181, 157 runs, 612, 471 runs batted in, 567, 553 runs produced, runs plus runs batted in minus home runs, 998, 867, total bases 1,000. I'll try that again. Total bases 1,731 to 1,588. Slugging percentage 584 to 532. Batting average 318 to 309. Stolen bases 119 to 75. These figures suggest that although Cepeda is no Mays and may never be, he remains an exceptionally strong offensive factor. Statistics or no, Cepeda probably did not realize that Mays, and not he, really was the big man on the Giants. Until the team made its first visit to its old New York home, the Polo Grounds, to meet the new tenants, Casey Stengel's Mets. Like all of the Giants, Cepeda was received warmly, but his welcome was placid compared to the thunder received for Mays. Says one Giant executive, Orlando didn't get over that for quite a while. It helped pave the way for what happened to him in the second half of the season. While Cepeda conceitedly poses the Giants a personality problem, baseball is full of personality problems, and several points can be itemized in Orlando's defense. Ever since Pedro Zorella discovered the boy on the Santa Cruz Puerto Rico team the in the early 50s and recommended him to the Giants, Cepeda has been burdened by an all but crushing buildup. After his first season in San Francisco, he evoked overenthusiastic comparisons with Jimmy Fox, Rogers Hornsby, Josh Gibson, king of Negro hitters and catchers in the era before organized baseball admitted the color player, and his own father, Pedro Cepeda, who rivaled Gibson as a hitter. As a fielder, Orlando is a first baseman strictly. He handles the glove well, especially on the throw into the runner ranges recklessly for foul flies, and has a good arm. As a base runner, he is swift for his size, but unstable. From 1959 through 1961, he was often played in the outfield, where he was very average, and even for a few games at third base, where he was a sideshow. He was not happy about the juggling, but had to go along. The shifts were engineered to make room at first base for Willie McCovey, who in 1962 more or less settled in the outfield. McCovey's sometimes authoritative bat would give the Giants some first base protection if they traded Cepeda. Cepeda's biggest handicap has been too much baseball. For about 8 years, he played around the calendar in the States and in Puerto Rico, where he is a national hero. Orlando is a young and ox strong, but the schedule wore him down. Physical wariness contributed to his batting fall off in the second half of last season. He stands well back in the box away from the plate like Hornsby and strides into the ball. When he is tired, his form becomes disarranged and he ends up with a disproportionate number of pop-ups and strikeouts, especially when he tries to overpower the outside pitch. At the Giants' request, Cepeda did not play in Puerto Rico last winter. He did some gymnasium work and reported for spring training at 227, 7 pounds over his normal playing weight. The Giants believe he would be more effective at 210 to 215, especially if he can melt the pounds off his hips and butt. Whatever his weight, he should benefit from the winter's rest. It is not imperative that Cepeda mature sufficiently to approximate a team player. He could remain primarily the virtuoso of the long ball and still be as productive as the Giants think he should be. When he first came up, his counselor was Tom Sheehan, the veteran Giant scout and troubleshooter and manager during part of the 1960 season, is known as the Great White Father of the Caribbean because of the many players he discovered in that area. Sheehan's advice to Orlando is as sound today as it was when first given. Quote, if you keep a level head and concentrate on the game, you will be a great player, unquote. When Cepeda joined the Giants in 1958, he was hailed as the finest prospect in baseball. Since then, his 5-year record by ordinary standards has been impressive. Some baseball men believe, however, that the big first baseman has not reached his potential, and that he never will with the Giants. And this is an article from the New York Times dated August 8th, 1964, that kind of tells us a little bit more about what happened after that particular case. It says, Cohane convicted for refusal to give source of article. The sports editor of Look magazine, Tim Cohane, was found guilty of criminal contempt of court yesterday for refusing to reveal the source of information used in a baseball article. The story, which was published on May 21st, 1963, implied that Orlando Cepeda, first baseman for the San Francisco Giants, was planning to increase his batting average and not to help the team. Mr. Cepeda filed a $1 million libel suit in a state court in California, which found the article not libelous. The United States District Court in Northern California upheld the decision, but the ruling was reversed by a United States Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Yesterday, in federal court here, Judge Charles H. Tenney sentenced Mr. Cohane, whose actual name is Timothy Cohane, to 10 days in jail. He suspended sentence until Wednesday to allow the author to consult with his lawyer. Judge Tenney was seeking a disposition from Mr. Cohane at a request of the California District Court. Mr. Cohane refused to name his sources for the article, except that they included one of the personnel of the Giant organization. The judge advised Mr. Cohane that the privilege he claimed had no legal justification, even though it might have certain moral justification. The case recalled that of Marie Torrey, former television columnist for the New York Herald Tribune, who served a 10-day jail sentence in 1959 for refusing to divulge the source of her information for a story about Judy Garland. So, Orlando Cepeda played from April 15th, 1958 to September 19th, 1974. He had a .297 lifetime batting average, 2,351 hits, 379 home runs, 1,365 runs batted in, and he was an 11-time All-Star from 1959 to 64 and again in 67, 1967 World Series champion, the 1967 NL MVP, the 1958 Rookie of the Year, 1958 home run leader in 1961, a two-time RBI leader, 61 and 67, and he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1999 by the Veterans Committee. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it here for now. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about this. Anything in the article or in the case itself, I'd love to hear what you have to say. And until the next time, I will talk to you later. Have a good day. Bye.